Many believe in forms of paranormal woo-woo, such as possession by the devil, extrasensory perception, ghosts and spirits, witches, and spiritual energy in mountains, trees, and crystals. So if people can be rational, why does humanity seem to be losing its mind? It's not an easy question, and I hope you will indulge me in a four-part answer. The most obvious is motivated reasoning. Now, rationality is always in service of a goal. However, that goal need not be objective truth. It can also be to win an argument in which the stakes matter to you. As the journalist Upton Sinclair pointed out, it's hard to get a man to understand something when his livelihood depends on not understanding it. To show how wise and moral your group is, and your religion, your tribe, your political sect, and how stupid and evil the opposing one is, sometimes called the my side bias, and probably the most robust of the 200 or so biases that have been documented by cognitive and social psychology, and incidentally, the only one that is uncorrelated with intelligence. Smart people can be ingenious at figuring out why their side is superior to their rivals, and within a coalition to gain status and to avoid ostracism as a hero for your side. The second part of the explanation lies in primitive intuitions, ways that our species has made sense of the world for millennia. For example, the intuition of dualism, that a person has a body and a mind. When we deal with other people, we don't treat them as hunks of meat or robots or wind-up dolls, but we assume that there is a mind, a locus of beliefs and desires, even though we can't perceive it directly. Well, from there, it's a short step to suppose that there can also be minds without bodies, which leads to beliefs in spirits and souls and ghosts, and afterlife, reincarnation, ESP. Another intuition that we are prone to is essentialism, that living things contain an invisible essence or stuff or power that gives them their form and their abilities. From there, it's a short step to believe that disease must be caused by some kind of adulteration of your pure essence by some foreign contaminant. And hence, we get resistance to vaccines, which, by the way, is as old as vaccines themselves. Because when you think about it, a vaccine consists of injecting into your flesh the very substance that causes the disease in the first place. It's not surprising that it is counterintuitive, and resistance to genetically modified organisms, which also seem to be adulterating the pure essence of your body with some kind of contaminant. It explains why people are receptive to various kinds of quack cures. We heard yesterday about threats to the northern white rhinoceros. One of the reasons the rhinoceros is so threatened is that there is a widespread belief that powdered rhinoceros horn is a cure for erectile dysfunction. And why people are receptive to homeopathy and herbal remedies, which seem to be infusing some kind of pure essence into the tissues of the body. And also why culture after culture have rediscovered the harebrained idea that you can cure disease through bloodletting and other forms of purging and fasting and getting rid of toxins. A third intuition that we use to make sense of the world is teleology. Now, we know that our own plans and artifacts are designed and organized with a purpose. Well, from there, it's a short step to imagine that the world is designed with a purpose, and so to be receptive to creationism and astrology and synchronicity, in the vague sense that everything happens for a reason. The third part of the explanation is that these primitive intuitions are unlearned and more objective truths acquired only by trusting legitimate expertise. Scientists, journalists, historians, government record-keeping agencies. Few of us can actually justify our beliefs, including the true ones, surveys have shown that people who deny the consensus of science, creationists and climate deniers, are not scientifically illiterate. In fact, on tests of scientific literacy, they score the same as people who endorse the scientific consensus. The only difference is politics. The farther to the right, the more denial there is of climate science and evolution. So weird beliefs persist in people who don't trust the establishment, who think of scientists and government record keepers and journalists as just another self-interested tribe. Finally, part of the answer to the question of why people believe outlandish things is it depends what you mean by believe. As a cognitive psychologist, I've come to realize that people hold two kinds of beliefs. There are beliefs in what I call the reality zone. This would be the physical objects around them, the other people they deal with face to face, the memory of their interactions with them. Beliefs in this zone are held to be testable, and people hold them if they are true. They have no choice because reality is unforgiving. You can't keep gas in the car and food in the fridge and the kids clothed and fed and off to school on time unless you are in touch with the hard truths of reality. On the other hand, there's what I call the mythology zone. These include the distant past, the unknowable future, faraway peoples and places, remote corridors of power, what really happens in the White House or 10 Downing Street or the Kremlin or the boardrooms of big corporations, the microscopic, the cosmic, the counterfactual, the metaphysical. Beliefs in this zone are held because they are entertaining, they are uplifting, they're empowering, they're morally edifying. Whether they are true or false is unknowable, according to our intuitions, and kind of irrelevant. That's not why you hold these beliefs. Examples include religion, which almost by definition consists of beliefs that you hold by faith rather than evidence. National myths, the great heroes and martyrs who founded our great nation. Historical fiction. Does anyone really ask the question of whether Henry V issued those stirring words that Shakespeare attributed to him on the battlefield? Fake news and conspiracy theories. People who believe that there is an all-powerful oppressive state seem to have no compunctions about sharing this view in public, where they would be vulnerable to arrest and imprisonment by the all-powerful state that they seem to be so concerned with. Or take, for example, the belief in Pizzagate. This was the predecessor of QAnon, the conspiracy theory according to which Hillary Clinton ran a child sex ring out of the basement of Comet Ping Pong Pizzeria in the outskirts of Washington, D.C. Now, among people who believed in Pizzagate, how did they react? Well, an example would be that one believer left a one-star review on Google of the pizzeria, said the dough was incredibly underbaked, and there were some suspicious-looking men giving funny looks to my son. Now, this isn't the kind of response that you would have if you literally thought that children were being raped in the basement. Presumably, you'd call the police. So what does the belief Hillary Clinton ran a child sex ring really mean? Well, I think an accurate translation would be, I think Hillary is so depraved that that's the kind of thing she's capable of. Or I think an even more accurate translation of that belief would be, Hillary, boo. Which is to say that beliefs can be expressions of moral convictions, at least in the zone in which it doesn't actually impinge on our day-to-day lives. Bertrand Russell once said, "It is undesirable to believe a proposition when there is no ground whatsoever for supposing it is true." Now, if you think that that is an obvious, banal, unexceptionable statement, then you are a product of the Enlightenment who believes that there can be evidence for all of one's beliefs, but this goes very much against human nature, and in fact, Bertrand Russell's apparently innocuous statement is a radical, unnatural manifesto. All of this leads to the question, how can we become more rational? Well, to start with, the tools of formal rationality, logic, probability, Bayes' rule, game theory, correlation and causation, I think should be part of the cognitive toolkit of every educated person. That rationality should be the fourth R together with reading, writing, and arithmetic in the nation's schools. But it isn't enough just to teach something in school, because as an educator, I would be the first to concede that generally pupils forget the lessons in the classroom as soon as the ink is dry on the exam. But these have to be part of the conventional wisdom, part of the etiquette and mores of rational discourse. It should be an awareness of typical cognitive fallacies like the availability bias, the my-side bias, arguing ad hominem, should be promoted and just part of our conceptual wisdom. The ideal of basing beliefs on evidence, changing one's mind when the evidence changes, should be seen as signs of strength, not as weakness. And I'm going to quote a friend who is a technical writer at Google, the linguist Ann Farmer, who signs her emails, "It's not about being right, it's about getting it right." Those are watchwords. Third, the institutions that promote rationality, with their rules for overcoming human fallacies and biases, must be safeguarded. In institutions, one person can notice and make up for another person's biases. This helps explain the puzzle of how individually rational people can be capable of individually irrational people can be capable of feats of great rationality. They can make us collectively more rational than any of us is individually. For example, if you give people simple logic problems, 1 out of 10 will get the correct solution in many of these puzzles. But if you put people in small groups, then 7 out of 10 get it right. All it takes is for one person to spot the correct answer, and he or she can almost always convince the other members of the group of the solution. What do I mean by rationality promoting institutions? Well, at least in theory, there's science with its demand for empirical testing and its institution of peer review. There's democratic government with its checks and balances. Journalism with its demands for editing and fact-checking. The judicial system with the adversarial proceedings. Academia, at least in theory, with the ideal of freedom of inquiry and open debate. And even Wikipedia, which has its flaws but is surprisingly accurate thanks to the community of editors that can alter one another's work and the commitment that they all sign up onto of objectivity and neutrality. Most social media, not so much. What it means is that to safeguard these institutions and their reputation and the trust in them, experts should acknowledge their fallibility. We start out ignorant of everything, and that should be made clear that the people who with a claim to expertise should not be priests, they should not be oracles, they should be prepared to show their work, why they believe what they believe, and gratuitous politicization should be acknowledged. This, I believe, is a severe problem with our august institutions of science today, which seem to be falling over themselves in an attempt to brand themselves with flaming left-wing rhetoric and symbolism and tropes, completely unaware of the fact that this is guaranteed to alienate the center and the right among the American population, to say nothing of politicians. So in sum, why do members of a rational species behave so irrationally? They deploy their rationality to win rather than to learn. They fall back on primitive intuitions. They distrust the institutions of rationality. And they treat beliefs as moral convictions, not empirical hypotheses. Thank you.